And away we go with episode 162, I think, Steve.
Yeah, it is. So,
I've actually been counting.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Steven, and this is Dan, my dad. And we have a very special guest on this episode, right, Dad?
Yeah, first time offender, first time hazing victim. Adam Wakeman joins us, and we're so excited to talk to you for the very first time about a lot of different things, some current projects, some past projects. You're welcome to talk about any future projects. And yeah, it's exciting because we're both huge fans of your work. So Steve, why don't you kick it off?
Right, so the big thing coming up is the new Jazz Sabbath release. The 1968 tapes comes out November
Finally.
29th.
I
Yeah,
waited over 50 years for this.
Yeah, like these were lost for a while, weren't they, Adam?
It's a weird one. Hello, Stephen. Hi, Dan.
Hey.
It's a weird one because they just keep turning up. I mean, who'd have thought? It's one of those magical stories that just keeps giving.
It's also the magic of I guess they made acetate a lot better back then than they make tape now, because there's a lot of tapes 2 years old that don't play on a machine, but yet here you are, the 1968 tapes. Analog never fails.
What can I say? I found it in a drawer the other day, and we thought, my God, what are the chances? And here it is.
Plus, I bet you looked over at that Atari tape machine the size of a wash machine for laundry and said, now I finally have something to put back on that thing and fire it back up, right?
You know what? The funny, I had a conversation with Ozzy about 5 or 6 years ago, about recording another album. And I was involved in an album about 10 or so years ago with Ozzy, but he really wanted to go back and do an album. I've already sidetracked, by the way. Sorry about that. I've already gone to a completely different thing, but it's tape related. He said he wanted to go into the studio and record an album like with the band and all do it on tape. And I said, it's such a brilliant, romantic, terrible idea, because we've all got used to doing stuff so quickly, you know, and people have forgotten that when you do a take on tape, on 2-inch tape, it takes 45 seconds to rewind that. So if you suddenly want to do another take, it's not like, right, okay, go. It's, okay, just give us a second.
All right, have a tea.
Yeah, wait, hopefully get in the right place. And if you're not, then you've got to go, you know,
shuttling back and forth. Wow, I remember that.
Yeah, and then he was like, yeah, it's probably a terrible idea. But
amazing. The sound, it's just the process that's so. 400 pounds an hour for studio time, and about 22% of it is taken up by going forward and backward on the tape to get to the spot. Oh, let's not forget about splicing out that quarter note, right, where the drumstick accidentally hit the rim or the cowbell.
Oh, do you know what? Not a splicing story, but I did an album when I was about, I must have been about 19 or so, over on the Isle of Man, where my dad lived at the time. And I was doing this album, and we were really tight on time. And it was like you were saying, it was like, you know, really expensive studio time. It's my dad's studio, actually. He ripped me off, I think. But anyway, that's not
for family. Like, I don't give a family deal. I charge more.
Exactly.
Steve's not a pain. Steve's good.
So we were literally like last listen through before like the final mix of the last song in the last hour of studio time, and we listened through it, me and the engineer, and I was like, it sounds great. Okay, so let's run this last mix, you know. And it was all tape, it was all kind of, you know, hands on the desk, and I said, just put the vocal in, and yeah, I think we're ready to go. And he looked over at the machine, and I looked over, and he was cleaning up the tape as we were listening through, and he basically wiped off the whole lead vocal that I'd done on this track with an hour left of the studio time to mix the track. And it was just one of those moments that there was no Apple Z back then. It was it was just look at each other and go, oh, you know, and then you got to do it again. But yeah, those things are kind of, you know, I'm glad that that's not an issue anymore. You know, at least you can Apple Z something where you've got backups and everything else. But yeah, one of the the less romantic things about tape.
Awesome. What was your biggest discovery when you came across these tapes?
So the 1968 tapes, I mean, Milton discovered them not that long ago. And Milton Keanes, if anybody's not aware, is the jazz pianist that had all his music stolen back in the early 70s. Milton Keanes was a pioneer, a pioneering British jazz pianist from the band Jazz Sabbath, and unfortunately had a heart attack and was hospitalised. And when he came out of hospital, a whole series of tragic events had occurred, which resulted in 2 lost albums and a burned down record plant, record factory, management doing a runner, and a band of musical charlatans called Black Sabbath, who stole all the songs. And poor Milton had nowhere to go and nothing to do. So he spent 50 years trying to claim the rights to his kind of musical heritage, if you like. Quite a tragic story until 2020, when the first album was discovered, which was just a magical piece of luck. And then indeed there it is. Yes, the missing album. So the master tapes were found and from 1969 and were remixed and remastered, and that is that actual recording. I mean, there's a few technical arguments that went on online for a while. One of which was how the album could have been recorded 5 or 6 years before I was born, but it's technicality. We don't worry about that.
People are always, it's semantics, but
I'm so picky, they always find something. So anyway,
that's when you know something is so good, when they find the minutia to pick on like that.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more, even though I don't know what that word means.
Now, I've always wanted to ask you, because of
the finer details, basically.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Because of your relationship with him, have you ever thought of collaborating with him on like a biographical film? I mean, so many people just are not familiar with this background and the whole story. Black Sabbath's gotten all the glory, and all of that. I think a biographical film would help just kind of bring everything to light, Well,
it's funny you should say that, because we did make a documentary about this, which you can find if you search Jazz Sabbath mockumentary. I don't know why they call it a mockumentary, ridiculous, but I think it's
it's for SEO purposes, so it gets more viewers that way.
It does. Yeah.
So if you search that, you will get the original documentary. There was a second documentary which coincided with the second album, Volume 2, which was released in 2022, and by magic, Stephen looks like he's got it there.
He's got it handy right there.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, these records got me very nostalgic for 3 months ago when I saw Jazz Sabbath at the Catalina Jazz Club.
I mean, that's another story altogether. But so the document, that's the second documentary, and that features a failed comeback attempt in 1985. And a kind of record release interview. And then, I mean, who'd have thought? I mean, even Milton had forgotten about the 1968 tapes. The record company basically wanted what the live shows in 1968 were being performed. They wanted to capture that on record. This is according to Milton, of course. And he claims that he gave Rusty Bedsprings Records the recordings, and they just threw it back in his face. They just said it was too experimental and people wouldn't get it. So Milton just forgot about it. So that album was just completely forgotten about. Went on to record the first 2 albums that you just showed. And then during an interview a couple of years ago, Milton suddenly discovered that he knew where the masters were after all, and they were in the top drawer of a cupboard in his bedroom. I mean, which is where everything is that you lose. If you're not sure where it is, best place to start is the sock drawer.
Right.
Ultimately, it's,
You find everything there except the missing sock, which is weird.
well, this is the thing. Do you know my? I'm not even going to say who it is, but somebody that I know and knew for a very long time had two odd sock baskets in their house, and I was like, "What? Why have you got two? Why not have one?" And then it was basically two massive piles of one sock from it. But anyway, yes. So sock drawer, best place to start.
Yeah, that's funny. I always seem to lose the left foot sock for some reason. I don't know.
At this point, I just wear mismatched socks because what's the point of going through all the effort of matching, you know?
Do you know, I totally agree. Apart from when you go to an airport, you've got to take your bloody shoes off, and then you stand there, and the only thing there is to do in that queue going through security is to look at what socks people are wearing and what unnecessary things they've got in their bags that they have to get out. That's the. But the sock thing, I always realise I've worn socks that have got holes in when I go through an airport, and I'm like,
that's funny.
Right. Well, I have a few photos to share, so I'll just present them real quick. So I'll just get to the right thing, the right window. Okay, is it? Okay, there's a band right there.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That was from our very first tour. So it's Jack Tustin on bass, and that's Dylan Howe on drums.
Dylan Howe.
Yeah. How did he get involved?
Yeah.
Originally, I mean, when the first album was done, it was Ash Sohn on drums and Jerry Meehan on bass, and it was all recorded kind of, sort of not lockdown time, but a bit before lockdown. But when it came to doing live shows, there just weren't any. So we weren't planning on doing any shows. It was just the album was out, and we thought, well, we'll see when things open up, and then we'll put some shows together. And when we did, I met Dylan. I met him years and years ago, and I remember thinking what a nice guy he was. And then I bumped into him at a show I was doing with Damien Wilson. And in the back of my head, I thought, I'm definitely going to ask Dylan if we come to do some live shows. So when I booked the first tour, it was about 10 shows or so around the UK. I asked Dylan, and he hadn't started doing a new album. He was about to start working on a new album. And he said, yeah, I've got, I'm around for a few weeks. So he was up for it. So he came along, and it was absolutely brilliant. We had a great time, and he's such a lovely, kind-hearted guy, a real pleasure to be around. And it was, we've got some similar background, if you know what I mean.
Just musically, such a great fit. I mean, he's the penultimate jazz drummer. He's so good. He really is.
Yeah,
we've heard him do so many other things with his father, Steve, of course, and the tour he did with Yes, but his jazz chops are unreal.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a departure from a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past.
Yeah.
But I've always been a big fan of jazz, a big fan of blues, sort of New Orleans blues jazz, sort of Dr. John. That style has always been my kind of go-to, rather than the kind of how do you describe it? Sort of Pet Shop on Fire jazz,
Acid jazz, yeah.
Too much. That's sort of too much for me. And with Jazz Sabbath, the whole kind of purpose behind it is I didn't want to try and do something I couldn't do. I wanted to make something out of, pushing the boundaries of what I can do.
Yeah.
And that way it will make playing it live not a chore. It will be a pleasure to do, and it would be, it would be fun.
That's cool. You basically took your lane and just widened it rather than tried to do something outside your main purview and comfort zone. Yeah.
Exactly. This is always the thing I find with music. And when you're younger, you make a lot of mistakes with this, I think, where you are trying to do something that you think other people want you to do, or you want to do something that you think is going to be popular, or is going to be more successful, or make you more money. All those things over the years that we're all guilty of doing at some point as musicians. They don't sort of land, if you know what I mean, because they don't have a genuine side to it. It's like, you know, people say you write a song, you write about what you know. You don't. There's no point me writing a song from the viewpoint of a 15-year-old girl, because I'm a 50-year-old man. You know, I need to write a song about things that I know about. You know, and it's that with Jazz Sabbath where I think, you know, it's genuine, and it took a long time to do because I was so worried that I was going to make a fuck up of it and it was going to be shit. That was one of the reasons it took so long. The other reason, of course, was that I wanted to make sure that Sharon and Ozzy and the guys were all, you know, it had their blessing, because, you know, I didn't want them to think that I was taking the piss, and it was, you know, it's comedy. I love comedy. I know Ozzy loves comedy, so I wasn't worried about that, and Tony. So I just wanted to get their approval, and that took a long time, just because there's so many other things going on, and I wanted to present it in a way that, you know, didn't look cheap, and it looked as the quality that it was going to be. So yeah, that's hopefully the genuineness comes through with it as well musically.
Yeah, absolutely. It does, and it absolutely honors the music. And I think it's real special when someone takes music by someone like Black Sabbath did of Jazz Sabbath, and they make it their own. It's just another way of honoring the music. But the other thing I wanted to ask you was two things. One, what kind of feedback have you gotten from any of them? And now that you have the formula down, is this something we can always look forward to? Like, I remember in the 70s being a kid, well, not that young of a kid, but I remember in the 70s as a teenager, every time, for instance, a new Rush album came out, the first thing we wanted to do after listening to it 10 times was, okay, when's the next one coming out? You know, or right after you see them in concert. Same thing with Yes, right after you see them in concert. Okay, when's the new album? Is it something that you have a formula and a future to look forward to? Or what's your plans if you have them yet, Adam?
Well, to answer your first question, Ozzy and Tony and Geezer were all very supportive. I mean, I think slightly bewildered is probably is fair to say, because you know, it's quite an elaborate concept, and the fact that online there were a few people that kind of fell for it, you know, that you know, people were saying that I should be sued and that I'm a liar. Which to me made it all completely worthwhile. Just to have a few. I did a I'm not going to say which American jazz publication it was, but it was somewhere sort of Northeast America, this jazz magazine that I spoke to, and I was 20 minutes into the interview before they realized that it was actually a
roasting.
Yes. This poor lady was just like, she said, I've just realized that, okay, I feel very stupid now. So,
oh wow!
Like, it's brilliant because the mockumentary, the whole thing is so. The whole point of it is to, you know, challenge thoughts and challenge what people think. And you know, this, I remember there was a version of an Oasis song 30 years ago by a band called Mike Flowers Potts, and it was basically Wonderwall, but in a kind of swing style. And the DJ that played it first on the radio, and it was like 5 years after Wonderwall by Oasis, and he said, "Oh, this is the original version." And the furor around, you know, everybody got, I can't believe Oasis ripped off that track, and everyone was talking about it. And I thought, that's what I want to achieve. I want to confuse people, you know.
You know, I love all that, and I gotta say, like, the music is one thing, which is great. If you just took the music alone, it would still be talking about really what a great project it is. But the fact of the story and everything like that, this is a form of escapism. This is a form. I would love to see this turned into a TV series. Like, seriously.
I've written 8 episodes. And I pitched it to a load of networks, got pretty much the same response, the same kind of response I get from a lot of agents and promoters around the world, is they don't really know what it's about. So myself and Mark at the label, we tend to book most of the shows. We've got the tour next year. I think we're nearly up to 40 shows. We're going back out to Australia again. We're going to Canada. I mean, it's confusing to some promoters, but what what we've realized is it works, and people love the mix of entertainment and good music and interesting arrangements where people that aren't necessarily fans of Black Sabbath but will recognize a few things, a few melodies, a few parts, and then we go off at pretty crazy tangents with all of it.
Yeah.
A lot of improvisation, which means every show is slightly different. When we answer your other question about the format, when I did the first album, it took me so long to sit and work out how I was going to approach each song.
I could imagine, yeah.
What I found is that quite quickly, the tunes that didn't fit under my fingers comfortably, I just left. I went, right, forget that one, on to the next one. Let's try.
That's smart. Yeah.
And then basically got an album together of songs that weren't, I mean, the first album, those songs weren't picked for a particular reason. They were picked because they were the ones that came most naturally to me at the time. And then when it came to the second album, I could be a little bit more, I understood a bit more of how the process kind of came a little bit easier to me, of the arrangements and the kind of style. I was more comfortable. So that was a little bit more, I haven't done that tune, I'll try that one. Still had the same kind of, if it didn't come naturally within a sort of 10-minute just playing around, then I was like, right, I'll shelve it, I'll come back to that one.
That's a great process. Yeah, I love that. I know there's a couple people that would probably hit me over the head for asking this, but I have to, and that is, and forgive me if the answer's out there and I'm just not aware of it, but to your knowledge, did the Ronnie James Dio era of Black Sabbath lift from Milton as well? Is there anything out there?
Currently, I know there isn't.
Okay.
Now, my understanding from Milton is that he is sticking with the Aussie era of Black Sabbath. That's my understanding. Who knows? There's plenty. All I can say is there's plenty of cupboards. There's plenty of drawers in that cupboard.
Right.
Who knows what's in the rest of them?
Behind the socks.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I like the formats that the 1968 tapes is in. I found these on the Jazz Sabbath. It's jazzsabbath.bandcamp.com. So you got the vinyl and the Digipack CD, the cassette tape.
What the hell's that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of a must. It's in the title. And this is a blue vinyl and the white label test pressing, which I believe those two are sold out. So it's quite a collector thing.
The pre-sale started a lot. Short the date is about a week ago or so. And those sold out really quickly.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I think one of the other things that is kind of because of the nature of the music and the way it's kind of portrayed, the vinyl is really appealing to people.
That makes sense.
And I think, I don't know, it's just the artwork is superb. Mark from Black Lake Records is an absolute genius designer, and he's an absolute kind of picker at detail, and just with all the albums, he's done a lot of research into the kind of old Blue Note recordings, and just to make sure everything is like the fonts aren't too modern, nothing's kind of nothing's too square in the middle, which nothing ever was in those kind of days. And it's just a really nice, again, it's coming with a lot of genuine passion and a lot of kind of detail.
Yeah, it really gives a nod to that era. Like you said, the art direction looks like it was just taken out of that, time warp.
Just the commitment to that authenticity,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, Mark is constantly kind of correcting me with, any continuity errors. If I suddenly say something that is a little bit, if I'm using the wrong year, he would go, well, technically you didn't do that tune until 1968. So just remember that.
Nice.
Which is great. It's great to have that kind of, that constant continuity checker.
Funny. I want to give a shout out to some people watching. We've got Gilly Good News says, hi guys. We'll get to you, Dave. Bella Lagrisi, same thing. Hello, fans. Hey, Adam. And Bella says, in my father's house are many mansions and all your lost socks. A quote from Jesus. Unless it's his gardener, Jesus. I'm not sure. And then we've got Dave Watkinson says the cover is very good, just right. And Dave also says, if I can scoop back up here and find it. Hello, all you cool dudes. What does a Brummy audience think of Jazz Sabbath?
It's been popular. We did a show in at the end of the last tour, a couple of years, last year or year before, 18 months ago or so, where we took over this theatre. Again, it's really funny with this because promoters don't want to get involved. They're I don't know, they fear jazz, I think. I don't know, but they're just
fear is the perfect word.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is they see Black Sabbath, they see Sabbath, and they see jazz, and they're like, I don't know what this is. You know, it's
two of their worst worlds colliding.
Exactly. It makes complete sense to me. Everything about it makes complete sense. But for whatever reason, promoters don't get it. So we end up doing most of these shows ourselves. So we'll hire the theatre, we'll sell the tickets, we'll do all the marketing, the promo. So we took over this theatre called the Crescent Theatre in Birmingham, and we sold out. It's like 450 people there. I wanted to make it a bit of a special event because it was Birmingham, and I brought brass section in, so we had brass, live brass, and I spoke to this old guy called Rick, keyboard player, Rick Wakeman. That's it. So I said, Dad, would you come and guest on a tune? And he was like, yeah, sure. He said, let me know how much you want to play. So I just want you to play for 16 bars in the last song, right? It wasn't announced that he was going to be there. It was a complete, surprise. And I got him I had a keyboard set up over next to the piano, which I was playing. And I got him to come on in the last song, walk across the stage and play a 16-bar solo, and then walk off the other side of the stage. That was it. That was his special guest appearance.
What was the song?
Black Sabbath.
Oh, okay, nice.
It was the end section of Black Sabbath. And then after that, I turned around, and he was obviously gone. And I was like,
what the hell was that?
Who's that bloke? And that was it. And it was so funny.
Did he wear a black cape by any chance?
You know what he wore? I don't know where he'd come from, but he wore whatever he was wearing, and he had like a bag with him, like a carrier bag. He looked like he just walked in from the street.
That's hilarious.
So good. It all adds to the whole comedy,
That's funny. That's great. I want to have Steve fly in a couple clips so that those who may not be familiar can see and hear some Jazz Sabbath. Then I want to completely switch gears and ask you about some other work that I personally am a huge fan of. Steve doesn't really give a shit. But no, I'm kidding. Steve, go ahead and show the clips, and then we'll move on to my favorite project, one of my favorite projects ever.
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. This one's from 2 years ago. Let's see if the audience can guess which song this is supposed to be.
Ooh. Go ahead and comment, folks, if you think you know. So we've got a guest from David Thompson that says on watching us on YouTube saying paranoid.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's correct.
That's it. Awesome. Good one, David. Show the next one. And then I want to make a comment about a song Steve sent me earlier today that I hadn't heard.
All right, we'll do. This one is from earlier this summer. So here we go. And people take a guess.
Come on, no guesses, folks. Come on. What do you think that was?
I'll tell you what, that took me till right at the very end.
Me too, to be honest with you. I was like, oh, okay, that's it.
So I remember where that was. That was on our Australian tour a few months ago.
Yeah.
Australia's not really there. You know how I know?
How's that?
I've been there, and it's not really there.
You sound like you're not really there right now.
Who knows what that is? Let's see if someone, before you guys say what it is, let's see if someone puts in a guess. David Thompson, do you know? Do you know that one as well? Dave Watkinson, Bella Lugrisi, Gilly, anybody else watching?
The only way anybody would know that, because that whole section, the first, 3/4 of that is a kind of abstract, improvised solo section. So there's no clues there at all. The only clues are
the dual drum breaks.
The drum breaks and the chord progression down.
And then it stops right before it gives into bam, 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 bam.
Made it a bit more of a challenge.
Down. Bella says take 5.
Oh, okay. We'll be back in a minute.
All right. Should I just
go ahead.
All right. It was Fairies Wear Boots.
One of my absolute favorites. But Stephen earlier today sent me one I hadn't heard before, which is my favorite Black Sabbath song from that era, and that is Supernaut. I just love that song with the drum and percussion break, and Ozzy's voice is just so killer in that, and the rendition you did of that was great. It's just
that's literally, that's on the new album, so it's just been put up now as a kind of a teaser for the album. It's the difficult, I say difficulty, isn't it?
It's a deep cut too. I like that there's some deep cut stuff going on.
Yeah, and again, that is purely down to just going through them and going, "Oh, this works well.
Yeah,
I'll run with this, and see how it goes." It's there's no kind of, I didn't consciously keep War Pigs back, for this third album. In the back of my head, that wasn't what I was planning.
Yeah,
it was just that it didn't come naturally to begin with, but the more this project has kind of developed, I approach things, it seems to work, a little bit easier to kind of approach some of these songs that with the first album, I was kind of quite nervously treading, around the tunes. But yeah, Supernaut was great. Yeah, one of the things I found is, the two most memorable things of this sort of music, of heavy metal music, it's obviously the guitar riffs and the vocal. So the difficulty for me is what's most memorable, what bits can I pick out that are the most suitable? Sometimes, Iron Man, for example, which is on the first album, there's no reference to the vocal melody. It's all the guitar chords. The vocal melody most of the time follows those chords, but I was conscious to follow those because they're so iconic, they're so memorable. That's the bit that I wanted to kind of, you know, to spark people's memories with.
Yeah.
Some of the other tunes, it's about the vocal melody, about capturing that little motif, you know, that people go, oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's
Super Not is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it sounds good. That it goes out there a bit.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. I want to mention a project that is possibly, it's, if not my top, it's in my top 5 for sure, concert films, and it's the project that you did with your father, Six Wives at Hampton Court,
Right.
and that is just such a great performance, such a great band. And you mentioned earlier, you know, the element of humor in music and whatnot, and someone who is a huge proponent of that and lives up to it is Ray Cooper, the great percussionist Ray Cooper, who was on board for that project, who was playing with everybody you could think of and name, basically. And I wanted to ask, like, how did that come about? At what point did you become involved, and what was the experience like? Because it's at Hampton Court, and you're playing out the Six Wives, and it's just a beautifully produced production. You know, the whole presentation is great, and then you come out at the end with the guitar type instruments with your dad's trading solos back and forth. It's just so well done. Talk about that experience, if you will.
So it was quite a while ago now. That
Yeah.
was, I mean,
Yeah,
over the years,
15 years ago, I think.
was it 15 years?
Wow.
I mean, it was a really, we did 2 nights. I remember we did 2 nights, and it's still, for me, one of the, take away the original Journey, the original, you know, King Arthur and all those kind of epic shows back in the 70s.
Yeah.
For me, this was a moment where, you know, Dad was back at that grand level where, you know, he doesn't do things by halves. You know, if he wants a full choir and orchestra, he'll do it with a full choir and orchestra. You know, it's not, the production has to fit what he's doing. He doesn't kind of, you know, he doesn't scale it down because of cost or whatever else. He has this grand idea, and that's, for me, that's what that sort of music's all about. It's about making a statement and people walking away going, that was epic, you know. And, you know, people do it now, you know, with big shows, big stadium arena shows with lots of production, which is great. But when the focus is the music, not visuals and everything else, it's much harder. And that was such a great show. Ray Cooper, I've not met him before, and I had this experience. I sat having a cup of tea with him, and I said, "You must have done, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of sessions with my dad back in the day." I said, "What was your favourite?" And he said, "I can't remember any of them." Right? And I said, "Oh, that." I said, "Well, that was the 70s, I guess, you know." He said, "No." He said there were 3 sessions a day for the musicians in that kind of that era, that pool of session musicians like my dad, Ray Cooper.
Yeah.
There were 3 sessions a day, and more if you wanted them, 7 days a week.
It was just like, you know, Hal Blaine working in the Wrecking Crew. They just recorded for so many artists.
Yeah.
It was like a 9-to-5 job almost, where they just blew through sheet after sheet after sheet of song after song for different artists. How do you recall a lot of that? That's interesting. It makes sense.
Yeah, and he just said, "I've done hundreds and hundreds with your dad." He said, "But I can't really remember any of them." He said, "Because we were always." You go to turn up at a studio and it'd be like, "Oh, Rick's on piano. Hey, Rick, how you doing? Brilliant. Right, get through this one. See ya. On to the next one."
Yeah.
So that for me was really fascinating, just because, you know, when I was in my sort of late teens, early 20s, and was involved in the sort of London session sort of scene, it was, if I had 2 sessions a week, that was a good week. And nowadays, it's like, for musicians, it's kind of, you know, studio sessions. If you want a studio session, you'd be lucky to get one a month.
Yeah.
It's a whole different industry that's gone. You know, that's changed. And I say gone. It's changed. You know, a lot more producers do their own things, whereas before producers were more of a, more of an ear and ideas and get the best from people. Now, budgets and everything else, I think people have developed into doing more of the things, and that moves the musicians into other areas.
Yeah.
But the Hampton Court thing, the other thing I remember was that was the first time I'd experienced they recorded the show and people, when they left, were able to buy the show on a CD. That was the first time I'd seen that. I mean, it was quite a weird, I'm glad I didn't really know about that, because that's it's an awful thing. Whenever they're recording a show or doing anything like that, you're always conscious that something might go wrong, a bit of gear might go down, and that's always a kind of slightly, that affects the show, I think. For me, the best shows are always the ones that are never recorded and never filmed.
Yeah, that's interesting. And another question I wanted to ask you was your work with the Eurythmics. I'm curious how that came about and what it was like working with them.
So I worked with Annie Lennox, I didn't work with the Eurythmics as the two of them. With Dave.
Oh, okay.
I did one show where Dave Stewart came and played guitar on one song. I think it was like an award show or something. But the time I was working with, a band. I think it was a pop band called Atomic Kitten, and the producer, the music director, he was a guy called Mike Stevens. He's the guy that put together lots of bands for lots of sort of major artists and pop bands and what have you. And he said, "Look, do you want to come down and have a chat with Annie Lennox? I'm looking at putting a band together. The first thing is just come down to his studio, Mike's studio, and meet her and just see if she likes you." Basically, it was she's meeting lots of people, lots of keyboard players. And I said, "Right, do I need to learn any songs?" And Mike said, "No. This is just come down, have a chat." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So I went down there and had 20 minutes with him and her in a room chatting. And then she said, "Right, do you want to?" I can't do the Scottish accent, but she said, "Do you want to play some of my songs?" And I went, "Not really." I said, I haven't.
Did you mean like not really at that moment, or not really ever?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Fortunately, she took it in the way I intended, which was not really now, because I hadn't learned any.
Okay.
And she was like, "Oh, okay." And I said, I haven't learned it. I said, "But I can come back and tomorrow and play some if you want." But she was like, "No, that's fine." And as I left, I thought, yeah, maybe I should have learned some songs. That would have probably been more helpful. But and then I got a phone call about an hour later saying that she likes me, and I was in there for the tour. So that was 2000.
I wonder if there was something in her mind that thought, this guy is so confident he didn't even learn any of my music. I wonder if that was part of it.
Don't even get me started on the whole audition process, because that was one of the first times that I got a gig without playing anything. Like, before there's always auditions, and I never got the audition. And somebody might come and see you live and play, and you get a job that way. But any actual audition that was held that I went for the job, I never got the job. Wow. And I'd be like, what am I missing here? Am I doing something wrong? So Annie Lennox, I got that gig without having to do an audition because I hadn't bothered to learn any stuff. I then, during Annie Lennox's tour, I got asked to go and meet the guys from Travis, the Scottish band called Travis.
Yeah.
And they were looking for a new keyboard player, and I was like, right, I'm not going to make the same mistake again, because I really want to work with those guys. It'd be great. So I learned there, at the time they had 4 albums out. I learned 4 albums, and I made sure that I could play them on a piano and carry the melodies, carry the parts, the important bits, because I was going to Fran Healy's house. He lived at the time in Crouch End in London. So I went to his house, and I was, in my head, I was like, I could play any Travis song at that time. I was like confident I can play. If he picks one, I can do it. And hopefully we get on. And we sat there and we drank tea, and in a teepee in his garden, because his wife was having a baby, and they had a birthing teepee, like a 2-story tent,
Wow.
John Anderson style, in the garden, which was her birthing teepee, which I'm sure the other neighbours weren't keen on in Crouch End, which is a very posh part of London. So we sat in there drinking tea, and then he said, "Do you want to hear the new album?" They just finished the brand new album from 12 Memories. So I went into the kitchen, and he played me the album, and I said, "Sounds great." And he said, do you want to come on tour with us? And I went, "All right." And that was it. And I left, and I thought, I didn't even play here either.
That's great. I love it.
But I was prepared. That day I was definitely
You were prepared. I think, and I'd love for you to weigh in on this, Adam. Often chemistry is everything. It is a people business.
Do you know what? So much this. I do a few talks every couple of years around music colleges where I try and bring as much of a realistic sort of approach to the music business, and as a working musician, as a session musician, or as a kind of developing artist, whatever else. When you're a session musician and you're working with lots of people, there are 95% of other musicians of the same kind of level that could do that job, but there's only 5% that will fit in without causing a problem or having an argument with somebody or pissing somebody off. And the balance is so fine on what's more important, because yes, the music's important, but most music, unless you go out into the realms of Yes and Genesis and Gentle Giant and Jazz Sabbath or whatever, it's like most other bands like Eurythmics, like Annie Lennox, like Travis, there are a lot of people that could do that job. But the important thing is to know when to shut up, when to talk, when somebody needs a hug, when somebody needs some kind of support or backup, or just to listen. There's as much therapy involved as there is performance, and I think that's not just the music industry, but when you're on tour with a band, everything's under the microscope. You're surviving on very little sleep, a lot of traveling. Often people, have things going on at home that you don't know about, and they're dealing with shit that's going on, and all these things are like the perfect storm. So to be able to manage that is so important. And when you do that successfully, and you obviously become friends with people. You make incredibly close bonds in a very short space of time, and then often you're done. And then you don't see them again for 10 years. I think on every tour you make one unbelievably close friend. That's what my experience. I've made one very long-term friend on pretty much every tour I've ever done, and those ones you keep in touch with, that maybe a bit more than normal, but you might not see them for 10 years.
Right. Who wants to be stuck on the road for even just 3 months, living out of a hotel, living out of a bus, going from bus to stage to bus to hotel to bus to the next place, with people that you don't want to be around or can't deal with, or that are cranky or curmudgeons or just whatever. And then add on everything you said, people having things going on at home and in their lives. It's such a balancing act. So it has a lot to do with it. And then we've got this story. I'm blanking out. I'm having my senior moment for the day.
Oh, is it the Yes one?
No, the Dave Navarro getting shoved by the lead singer, on the show, getting stopped. That who was that? We just posted about that news story. It was
it was
scrolling through the news to see if I can. It just happened like 2 nights ago.
Oh,
yeah.
Steve, you know what I mean? You just posted it.
I know what you're talking about, but yeah, that's gonna date this episode, I guess.
Yeah, but the thing is like, how does it get to that point where bandmates get in a physical altercation on stage? How fucked up were things behind the scenes to lead to where it happened in front of everybody that's paying money to see you, and everyone's got one of these now, so everyone's like, how do you lose your fucking mind so much that you do that in front of people? Like in a hotel lobby, that'd be one thing. In the hall outside your room, that'd be one thing. But on stage,
for people, that's one thing that I think that you have to always bear in mind, is that somebody has paid money to come and see your show, and I'm not, I'm not kind of, I don't know the situation there with Dave Navarro. I don't know how that kind of all came about, but all those things that I've talked about can manifest, and the only outlet is that bit where you're on stage and you're passionate about what you're doing. That can be the spark, and it's incredibly unfortunate, but you have to remember that people are paying money to come and see a show, and that you've got to keep that stuff. Don't air your dirty laundry kind of, in front of the public. I don't think there's any benefit to that, but sometimes shit happens, and I mean that similar thing happened to John Five, the guitar player, when he was with Marilyn Manson. I think Marilyn Manson kind of hit him on stage. I think there was an altercation there, and I've got a friend called Adam Faulkner, drummer, who was playing with Baby Shambles, and Pete Doherty, the guitar player singer from Baby Shambles, who was in the Libertines as well, at some point threw his guitar at him on stage over the drums, and
wow.
it was only his cymbals that stopped him from getting a broken nose. And the audience kind of, with that sort of music, the audience are kind of thinking, oh, this is amazing, this is great, parts, how special. And Adam Faulkner quite rightly pulled him to one side and said, do that again. And
right,
I'm not, it's abuse in the workplace, where
yeah,
I don't want to get too woke about these things, but it's like there's a standard of, safety in environments. I've been in positions which have been very uncomfortable with some bands because
right.
of a member of the band or the touring band, where I've had to speak out and say this is not a safe environment. I'm quite happy to sort of hold my own, but if somebody else walked in who wasn't part of our our group, for example, and got hit by a flying suitcase, there's a lawsuit, and that's costing somebody a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately for me, all my experiences with the kind of the bigger bands, that stuff that just doesn't tend to happen because there's enough people around who are there for a good reason to manage things and to make sure that there aren't 5 shows in a row where people are really tired. Everybody's they're not on a 5 a.m. flight somewhere in the morning after a show and then a show that night. Those things just magnify any possible, fuck ups and people's tempers and everything else. So, all the time with Sabbath and Ozzy, it was like 3 shows a week. It was great, and everyone was always pleased to see each other. That's the other thing,
Right. And just to close the loop on that, thanks, Bella. He looked it up, and it's the alternate rock band. Of course, it was Jane's Addiction, canceled the rest of its tour after lead singer Perry Farrell tried to punch guitarist Dave Navarro on stage during the weekend. And I saw the video that was shot by a fan. The crew broke it up, and you could see the drummer just throw his in-ears out and stand up like, what is going on over there with these guys? So it's a shame that it came to that, but it is a lesson in chemistry as well as everything you said, that it's, how many of you watching have ever been on a family vacation and by the time you were done, you just needed a vacation from your family or even your one significant other? Hopefully my wife's not watching, but anyway.
So basically what you're saying, Dan, is every Christmas day, by about 5 or 6, everyone's had enough sherry and what have you. And it's like, then people start bickering and bringing up, oh yeah, but last Christmas you didn't do this and I got you that. And I mean, that's basically every family Christmas, surely.
Bringing stuff up from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, that's when Steve was born.
No, but speaking of bringing stuff up from 30-ish years ago. So what I was trying to segue toward, what I thought you were going to get to was, so I remember a while ago reading that, yes, back in 1998, their keyboard player got stuck in New York, and so they needed someone for the Manchester gig, and they ended up reaching out to you, but then they ended up, their keyboard player was able to make it, but they had you play on the encore Starship Trooper. Do you remember that at all, that experience?
I remember it very well. I was, so yeah, it's 98 February. Can't remember the date, but it was
26th, according to what I'm looking at.
okay. So I was at my girlfriend at the time's house. She was living with her mum down in Kent, and I can remember that very well because she's now my wife of 25 years, and we'd not long been sort of dating, and the internet signal where she lived, it was like, you know, plug in. That was the kind of, you know,
Modem.
yeah, modem. Dial up. So, and you didn't really check emails every day. It wasn't like one of those sort of things. But I had a message from my dad just saying, you're going to need to speak to me before you reply to these calls. So I spoke to my dad, and he said they asked my dad first, who was the obvious choice,
Right.
you know, because Igor, who was the keyboard player at the time,
Yeah.
I think, if I remember rightly, I found out that he'd gone outside for a cigarette. He'd opened a door at the airport to go outside for a cigarette. Now, I don't know if this is 100% true. This is what somebody had told me, that he went. So he opened a door at the airport and kind of walked out on the tarmac to have a cigarette. And of course, they arrested him and stopped him from, you know.
Oh my gosh.
So he missed the flight. So then they weren't sure if he was going to make it or not. So my dad wouldn't do it, and they said to him, well, you know, can you suggest anyone? And he said, well, Adam could handle it. So then I said, fine, okay, when is it? So this was I don't know, say it was like a Friday or something, Friday morning, and the show was Monday.
Oh.
No, the show was like Sunday or something. It was like a couple of days. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I'll give it a go. And I didn't really know the music that well. I knew, you know, a couple of the songs, and I knew, you know, from listening to it. But it's very different listening to a few songs to being able to play all the intricate keyboard parts, you know, that my dad had done. So I didn't even have the records, because I think I swapped them when I was a young kid for football or something. So I drove into London. There was a record shop called Steve Sounds in Leicester Square. It's long gone now. And I went in and I bought all the records that had the songs on for the set list, and then drove back to my house, which was up near Bedford, sort of about 60 miles north of London, 60, 70 miles north, and stayed up all night charting the songs out on bits of paper. And in the morning, I got on a train up to Manchester, and no sleep. I had one keyboard with me, and I was going to use Igor's rig, and I thought, well, I'd just take my one, the Korg M3, and I thought,
The one you know how to use.
I program really quickly, and I was like, right, okay, that's it. So I got up there, and there was a little kind of rehearsal that afternoon. We ran about half the set. It was pretty intense. I remember laying on the floor in the hotel room thinking, have I bitten off more than I can chew? Yeah, as a 23-year-old, you know, keyboard player, I was like, maybe this is just that one step too far. And then the next day we ran through the rest of the set, and it was all fine. And then they heard that Igor was going to make it. So John was really kind. He said, well, Adam's learned all the stuff. Why don't we bring him on, let him do the encore, let him do Starship Trooper and the Worm section. So I was like, I'll do as much or as little as you like, but it kind of makes sense now, if Igor's going to make it, that he does the show and then I come and do the encore. So that's what I did. And then, you know, many years later, I got a call about joining the band, and if I'd be interested in doing it. I was well into my years with Ozzy at the time, and I thought, you know what, there's nothing I felt I could bring to the table that would really be beneficial, not just to me, but to people who love the music. It didn't fit well with me to leave the camp I was in after 10 years with Ozzy, and I've been working on an album with him, and all the years doing the Black Sabbath stuff. I thought, I'm happy where I am, and I'd rather leave that leave that to one side. And of course, then Oliver came in, and that's a whole other story.
That's
yeah,
great.
definitely. And you also played with Straubs a couple of different periods. I think early 2000s and mid 2010s. What was that like?
Oh, it's great. I mean, they were the band that kind of, that started it really from my dad. And there wasn't as much kind of, he made a great impact in that band when he was there. But the core of it was based around Dave Cousins, and was, that folk sound, his songwriting, his kind of, his part in that was such a big kind of character. And I really enjoyed it. I loved playing Dad's parts. I loved playing the kind of, hero and heroine and all those tunes was so great. And I knew the band really well. I knew Chaz, the bass player, very well, and I bumped into them over the years. So it was like just playing with a bunch of, old friends, really. Old being the words, because they were a few years older than me. And Richard Hudson, of course, who played drums in a period before Tony Fernandez. So I did a couple of tours with Tony Fernandez. I did a few tours with Richard Hudson, who is actually with me tomorrow. He's coming into my studio, and I'm working with him on his on the solo album he's been working on for many years. So whenever we find a little bit of time, he phones up and says, "You haven't got a free day in the studio?" And I'm like, "Come on up." I think it's just an excuse to go to the pub, to be honest. But the album pretty good.
Here's a message from Bella Lucreci watching. It says, "I saw you play tambourine with Yes at the National Harbor after the deluge. No one left, and we all had lobster rolls and wine. Thank you very much." That's funny. Do you remember that?
I'm not sure that was me. When was, what year?
Do you remember, Bella, what year
I'm not
that was?
Familiar with this.
Maybe he's thinking of Ray Cooper.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I'm like,
I don't remember either.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right. But also more recently, you got to tour with Uriah Heep. I think it was this past summer. So, if I remember correctly. So, what was that experience like?
That was great. That was really good fun. Now, I'd met Russell Gilbert, the drummer, before. I did a random show up in Perth in Scotland with him and Robert Hart on vocals, Jim Kirkpatrick from FM. It was just a thrown together thing, a one-off event, and I really liked him. He was a very funny guy. We got on very well. And then just randomly, he sent me a message just saying, "Look, we've got this tour coming up. Is it something that you fancy doing?" And I had quite a lot of notice, actually. It was like 4 or 5 months notice, and it fitted. I mean, it couldn't have fitted any better, really. I'd just finished a swing tour with a big brass section with Tony Hadley, a singer from Spandau Ballet, and we did a UK tour. And I went away for a couple of weeks or something else, and then the day after I got back, the Uriah Heep tour started in America. So I was like, it never works out like this, but it all just kind of slotted in. So I went out. We had a day's rehearsal somewhere in Florida. I met them all. They're all really lovely people, and I thought this is going to be great. And they were very, there's specific parts to play, obviously, like with any sort of music, but they were very kind of, open with solo sections. You don't have to sound like a record, do what you like. And by the end of that tour, there was a little solo spot which I got to nearly sort of 16, 17 minutes. It was great,
Nice.
So I sort of eked it out as much as I could. And it kind of felt weird because I had a call just before Christmas to go and do a show with Deep Purple, because Don Airey had had some medical emergency that fortunately was nothing serious, and he was fine, but they were unsure if he could fly. So they needed somebody to go out to India and play this big festival. So there was no sort of scheduled sort of rehearsals. I had about 10 days notice for that. And I got a call from Simon McBride, the guitar player, the day before I left on a Jazz Sabbath European tour. So I had 7 or 8 days with Jazz Sabbath. where basically I had to learn the Deep Purple set in the van, just kind of playing out the speakers in the van. The poor guys in Jazz Sabbath, the bass player and the drummer were just like, we are sick to death of Deep Purple, because that's all they played for all these long drives. But it was a kind of a similar, it was great having done the Deep Purple show and then going to do, because it's quite similar, there's a lot of similarity. The organ is obviously the main kind of part from the keys department.
Yeah.
It was great. It was, you're right, it was a really good time.
That's great. By the way, playing tambourine the day of the deluge, Bella reminds us that was the tour where
that might have been Oliver then, if it was the tour with Asia.
Yeah,
I think that was my brother. So that was definitely, I was definitely 2000. Was that 2000? 2009. 2009, right? So I was in mid. I was at the end of the Sabbath tour, I think, at that point. So I definitely wasn't there.
That was Steve's first Yes concert, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that tour. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Steve doesn't remember this, but well, at least he has said he doesn't remember this. But my wife has said that when I got up to go to the restroom between the two bands, Steve said, "So are you going to marry my dad?" And yeah, she swears that he doesn't remember. You still don't remember that, Steve?
Yeah, no, I don't remember. I remember the show though. So.
Yeah. Well, that's how old were you at the time? 14, 17?
Yeah, 14, almost 15. So yeah.
Yeah. And we did end up getting married that year.
Yeah, you and Denver.
No, a little. I proposed to her that year. We got married a few years later. Yeah, there you go.
Right. Yeah, that's the
time. I think there's a lot of one of the most brilliant things about live music is those situations, those things that you just said that happen, where people get married, they have their first kiss, and playing with Tony Hadley recently. I've done the last sort of 3 or 4 years with him, kind of a bit more permanently. We play a song called True, which you may know or may not know. It's a real, it's a love song, ballady thing from the 80s.
Yep.
Okay.
But talking to people, couples that are there, there's an awful lot of people that have done an awful lot of things to that song.
Yeah, it's one of those part of the soundtrack to our lives for a lot of people's songs.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. I mean, for me, going to a Yes show, I can't remember which one it was, when I was about 10. My dad was back in the band. I was like 10 or 12 or something. That was the point for me where I said to myself, that's what I'm going to do. Don't care how I get there, what I end up, I don't know where I'm going to end up, but that's what I'm going to do. I want to be a musician, and I want to play on stage. And there was never a kind of thought of, what if this doesn't work? That came much later.
Yeah.
Last week, I think my mum was here. My mum was here for a few days while I took my daughter up to Aberdeen University, which she's just started. And we came back. We had a night here with my mum and stepdad John, and I'm pretty sure my mum still thinks I'm going to go to university at some point and get a proper job. I'm like, Mum, I'm 50 now. This is it.
Go teach.
Do something sensible.
Take a picture in front of one at university and send it to her.
Right. So folks, check out the 1968 tapes from Jazz Sabbath. I'm seeing if I can share the cover again so people can see it again. And there we go. Yeah. So again, like really great stuff. I love these jazzy renditions. It's been so long since I did a deep dive of it's been so long since I did a deep dive of the Black Sabbath music that I feel like Jazz Sabbath is sort of taking more of the forefront of my mind as far as that music goes.
It's weird to hear the Black Sabbath version, Steve. Like, what the hell is that?
Maybe.
What's with the word?
Well, I would need to dive into all that again, but yeah, I'm like really loving these jazzy versions of the song.
Do you know the weird thing is that because the Jazz Sabbath stuff came after I'd finished playing with Black Sabbath, the last Black Sabbath tour was 2018, I think we finished. That was the last proper show. We did one we did one show which at the British Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, which was a complete surprise. Nobody knew it was going to happen, and it was Keanes, I think. I don't know what happened, whether he had COVID or something, but Sharon said, could I play bass? I was like, yeah, sure. So I played bass with Tony and Ozzy, and Tommy Clefitis was on drums. And I remember thinking, this is so weird because, I'm used to playing guitar and keys for the Sabbath thing. I've never played bass for them before. I mean, it wasn't, it was only Iron Man and Paranoid.
Like only 4 strings. How hard could it be, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then I was kind of thinking, yeah, no, I know the sort of jazz version of Iron Man now. I'd forgotten how the actual kind of just the straight bit goes,
This was the 13 tour?
So the last tour was The End. So 13,
The End, yeah.
13 was the one before that, which was
right.
2013, 2014, and then 2017, 18, I think was the farewell, The End tour.
Yeah. Awesome. Adam, thank you so much for taking time with us. And folks, thank you so much for watching. Adam, hang on the line with Steve and I after we say goodbye to the audience. And folks, you can write us if you have ideas, comments, suggestions, questions, donations. You can write us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. You can actually make a donation if you don't want to see any of this and you just like listening to the audio at anchor.fm/Yesshift or on all your favorite podcast platforms. We're live when we broadcast every episode on Facebook and YouTube at Yesshift. And thanks for following what we do. Drum Talk TV fans who are watching, lots of stuff going on in the membership site, which we're going to talk to Adam about in a moment. And game show tonight, if you're watching live, that is at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and at like 2 a.m. UK time for those of you who don't get any sleep because you're staying up doing who knows what. Join us for a music-themed game show. Go to the Drum Talk TV page, watch a video, sign up for our newsletter. You'll get the link to the game show via our newsletter about 30 minutes before it starts. And Adam, again, thank you so much for sharing your stories. And tell Milton we say hello, give him our best, and we just congratulate that he's finally rising above. We'll just say above the you-know-what.
Yeah,
okay?
The truth is out there. The truth is out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you for having me. It's been great talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.